Unlocking Simplicity in Serverless Architectures, a guide to AWS Lambda Function URLs. This podcast is brought to you by Business Compass LLC. We are an Amazon Web Services advanced consulting partner. We build and migrate workloads to Amazon Cloud. Our website is businesscompassllc.com. Our phone number is 973-638-2228. Our email address is contact@businesscompassllc.us. Serverless architectures have revolutionized how developers build and deploy applications, offering unparalleled scalability, cost efficiency, and ease of management. Among the tools in the serverless arsenal, AWS Lambda stands out as a versatile service that enables developers to run code without provisioning or managing servers. With the introduction of AWS Lambda Function URLs, developers now have an even more streamlined way to invoke Lambda functions, bypassing the need for API gateway in specific scenarios. This podcast explores AWS Lambda Function URLs, comparing traditional approaches with this new method, and walks you through building a simple CRUD serverless application. Overview: Understanding the role of AWS Lambda Function URLs in serverless architectures. AWS Lambda Function URLs provide a simple way to create HTTP endpoints for your Lambda functions. They allow direct invocation via a URL without needing an API gateway. This can significantly reduce the complexity and cost of deploying serverless applications, especially for use cases where the advanced features of API gateway are not required. High-level design: Comparing traditional approaches with Lambda Function URLs. Traditionally, serverless architectures involving AWS Lambda required an API gateway to handle HTTP requests, route them to the appropriate Lambda functions, and manage tasks such as authorization, request validation, and rate limiting. While API gateway is robust, it can add complexity and cost to simple use cases. On the other hand, Lambda Function URLs offer a straightforward alternative for scenarios where the full capabilities of API gateway are not needed. With a direct URL, you can invoke Lambda functions with a single HTTP request, simplifying the architecture and potentially lowering costs. API gateway and Lambda functions. API gateway is still the go-to choice for scenarios requiring features like complex request/response transformation, caching, throttling, integration with other AWS services. However, Lambda Function URLs provide a lightweight, cost-effective solution for more straightforward use cases. Direct invocation using Lambda Function URLs. With Lambda Function URLs, you can directly invoke a Lambda function using a standard HTTP request. This method is ideal for use cases like webhooks, lightweight APIs, and microservices that do not require the advanced features of API gateway. Building a simple CRUD serverless application. Let's build a simple CRUD, create, read, update, delete, application using AWS Lambda Function URLs and DynamoDB as the backend database. Setting up the environment. Create an IAM role. This will allow your Lambda function to interact with DynamoDB. Ensure it has the necessary permissions, including Amazon DynamoDB full access. Lambda function creation and URL activation. Create a new Lambda function in the AWS Management Console. Attach the IAM role you created earlier. Once the function is created, navigate to the function URL section and activate it to generate a unique URL. Sample operation: Creating a database entry. Here's how to handle a POST request to create a new entry in the DynamoDB table. Exports.handler equals async, event, equals greater than. Const body equals json.parse event.body. Const, id, name, description, equals body. Const params equals table name, your Dynamo table. Item, id, s, name, s, name. Description, s, description semicolon. Try. Await DynamoDB put item params, promise, return. Status code, 200. Body, JSON.stringify message, item created successfully semicolon. Catch, error. Return. Status code, 500. Body, JSON.stringify message, error creating item, error, error.message semicolon. Semicolon. Request body example. Id, 123. Name, sample item. Description: this is a sample item. DynamoDB table setup. Create a DynamoDB table named your DynamoDB table with ID as the primary key. Ensure your Lambda function has the necessary permissions to interact with DynamoDB, invoking the Lambda function locally. You can test the Lambda function locally using AWS SAM CLI or by sending an HTTP post request to the Lambda function URL with a tool like Postman or curl. Limitations of AWS Lambda Function URLs. While Lambda Function URLs simplify deployment, they come with certain limitations. No support for complex routing or API management. Unlike API Gateway, Lambda Function URLs do not offer features like path-based routing or request validation. Limited authorization options. Only IAM-based authorization is supported. No OAuth, JWT, or other API gateway features are available. Asynchronous invocation support. Lambda Function URLs can handle asynchronous invocations, but more advanced asynchronous workflows may still require API gateway or event bridge. Custom domain configuration. You can configure a custom domain name for your Lambda Function URL using Amazon Route 53 or another DNS service. However, this adds some complexity compared to using API Gateway's built-in custom domain support. Authorization options. Lambda Function URLs support IAM-based authorization, allowing you to restrict access to the function URL based on IAM policies. This ensures that only authorized users or services can invoke your Lambda functions. Support for async invocation. Lambda Function URLs support synchronous and asynchronous invocations, providing flexibility depending on your application's requirements. Conclusion. Leveraging AWS Lambda Function URLs for efficient serverless development. AWS Lambda Function URLs offer a simplified, cost-effective alternative to API Gateway for certain serverless use cases. While they do not replace API Gateway for complex applications, they are an excellent tool for lightweight APIs, webhooks, and other scenarios where simplicity and cost are priorities. Thank you for listening to our podcast. Please share this podcast, visit our website and follow our social media links.